movement in talent that is happening. In the last 18 months, we have tracked just in the US alone about 35 to 40% of the talent has changed jobs or moved to different companies. A combination of such volatile state, what has been called either as a great resignation or a great opportunity from each as well. And what we were attempting to do is trying to use career progression as kind of a tool that would really help in retention and help in taking challenge in the next level. Because if you look at through any lens, career progression is a fantastic tool for you. Take for example, the United States, African American talent in the IT sector. If you apply all the constraints from a software development, software engineering standpoint, there is about 12,000 to 13,000 professionals. Hopefully you can hear me better. Sorry about that. So one of the key points I was trying to emphasize is the pipeline effect that career progression brings in, right? If you look at United States talent from African American technology talent standpoint, all the companies are pretty much fighting for about 13,000 professionals talent if you apply all the factors of software engineering talent. But if you look at just nearby talent, like the IT talent, you have a huge pipeline of 495,000 people just in the United States. The problem is we don't give chance to that pipeline and we don't have mechanisms to really track that. So how do we truly bring in career progression as an attractive retention tool, and how do we actually ease the pain of recruitment is one key component that we are hoping to cover. There will be a lot of interesting slides, and you can always, if you need a copy of that, you can always stop by at our booth. My partner in crime has kept a booth outside, so we will be happy to share the deck. One of the important component for us to understand career progression, how do we implement a very solid career progression framework, is to understand the digital transformation that every industry is actually going through. Take, for example, our own energy industry here in Houston. Largely, the digital is impacting exploration layer, extraction layer, and production and processing layer. And digital is one way to imagine there is a consistent framework of how it actually impacts the industry. You have certain themes. It could be assets monitoring type of use cases, that which is really leveraging technologies such as robotic process automation, IoT layer, AR, VR, and big data analytics and robotics. And as a result of these convergence of various technologies, you have new roles coming up, and these roles are not necessarily jumping from the sky. There is a genuine progression that is happening across multiple layers. For example, if you have a quality assurance person on the technology layer, today they are doing a lot more QA automation driven work, and that is taking them closer to being a software developer. So we have to, any effective career progression framework that you can put together have to understand the digital transformation that is happening in the world. And largely, companies are taking advantage of fewer hotspots globally and as well as in North America. So if you look at the digital hotspots, energy companies are largely hiring from Bay Area, New York, Boston, Charlotte area, and so on. But we can actually create more digital talent right here in Houston if we understand the interlinks across various roles and skills. And the same framework exists across multiple industries. We realize that some of you could be from utilities, some of you could be from energy and other industries. But largely, digital transformation can be imagined as themes of digitization, use case clusters, and the assets that it will impact, and the technologies that it will drive that. So if you understand this layer, whether you are an L&D person or a recruiter or a diversity person, you can actually connect to the raw use case that the that the enterprise is actually trying to impact. And that actually takes you to a more skill level view of the world. Now, our Draup's prediction is in the next 2 to 3 years, we would largely migrate towards a skill-based economy rather than a job role or a job family-based type of a hierarchy. And that is a very important distinction to understand, because the same skill can exist in two different contexts. So take, for example, a digital skill like Python, right? It can be used from a data science layer. It can also be used from a data engineering layer. So you have to, whether you are using it from a large data processing or doing advanced modeling using data science. So the same skill can exist in two different contexts. So it will be important to understand the context behind the skill. Where are we taking this? One of the challenges, we have actually assisted about 100 plus customers in the last 2 years in career progressions across the globe. And what are we see largely 4 enabling building blocks for an effective career progression, right? One is defining the taxonomy and defining what we call as the early career roles into the taxonomy. Now, when we inspect taxonomies across enterprises, what we don't see is enough early career talent or early career roles that are being built into the framework. So whether if you are looking at something like a database layer, there is not enough analyst layers or analyst roles that are critical to progress the pipeline. So not having that actually comes and bites you later on because you don't have enough pipeline. And the other important thing that is happening in the taxonomy is you have certain roles like cloud support engineer or cloud DevOps, where the certification itself is taking about 2 or 3 months, but you're asking for like 4 to 5 years of experience. So there is an experience inflation that has gotten into across multiple roles. So we would have to really relook at all the taxonomy, and this taxonomy that we have built also looks into what we call as the pre-professional certification. That becomes very, very important to understand. So today, the entry point could be through an associate degree, or it could be through a bachelor's degree from a university. So we cannot ignore the community college that is turning out fantastic digital and technology talent. The challenge is we don't create enough jobs at an entry level for those professionals. Thereby, over time, we have a pipeline problem. And one other important thing that we realize is digital is not just technology roles or software roles. It impacts marketing, it impacts sales, it impacts procurement, it impacts finance. So you would have to view digital from a taxonomy through the lens of all corporate functions. Now, we recently assisted a soft beverages company create a very comprehensive robotics framework that would actually help their warehouse operations. Now, there will be a central robotics operation that would support, say, 100 to 200 warehouses across the country. And previous wisdom would say that we would have to create a robotics engineer at each site. Now, through cloud, you are creating a centralized warehouse supporting robotics unit, and that actually makes it a lot more elastic in terms of progressions that you can bring in, and more effective because you are supporting multiple warehouses from a cost optimality standpoint. So understanding what are the best practices, how other companies are creating these taxonomies, how leading companies and bleeding edge companies are doing it, can be extremely useful. So the first building block is really, we want to emphasize getting this taxonomy right. And this can differ based on different companies and different industries, but a very important layer is the taxonomy. The second component is a little busy slides, these are, the second important component is the progressions that happen. It is very dependent on various job families. Say, for example, you look at something like cloud support. engineer. Someone starts from a community college or a university, they start as a junior cloud engineer. What are they doing? They're basically going and looking at whether all the third-party systems are implemented well, are they running well, are their service levels are maintained, all those type of basic monitoring. And from there, they become, they learn a few automation aspects and start programming certain scripts. And they get into maintenance of data assets, maintenance of software, and they become cloud automation engineer. And from there, if they are super passionate and gain all the talent, they could become a DevOps person, and they could start becoming cloud architect and so on. This type of movement is very, very specific to job families. And a lot of movement is actually happening. The reason why I say that is, let's say your business as a recruiter, if you are looking at, I need a DevOps engineer, what are the neighboring roles that you can actually look for? Because hiring for DevOps is a very, very difficult job right now. It may take like 3 to 4 months. Then what are the feeder roles that you could consider that you could bring in and have a possible training plan to bring it into the system? That type of dynamics exists even across whether it is big data analytics, network engineering, or even digital marketing. In digital marketing, for example, the people who are very good in producing content marketing, they can be effectively trained on the SEO, SEM layer so that they can actually become a very, very effective online campaign manager or online digital SEO manager and those type of roles. So understanding the second layer is mapping in a very granular way what these movements are can be extremely helpful. And you can have such career conversations in a granular way when even before the retention hits. Now I'm sure many of you would be doing a high risk analysis in terms of where the attrition may actually hit you. And in that type of analysis, these are the tools that can actually help you. If you are noticing more attrition at the entry level, you can sit with those engineers or resources and walk through the possibilities and say that this is the type of progression that we have planned. And that granular view can actually help you save resources leaving your enterprise. The third layer that we actually looked at is within the job family. So we spoke about taxonomy that is across the enterprise. We looked at granular movements within a certain job family. And also within a particular job role, how do we progress a resource or a candidate through the system? And this is where a boilerplate model for each of the job role is very important. So we can understand what are the various levels. So we have mapped, in this case, like from an apprentice to a mastery level, right? This type of mapping each job role down to the level of various levels and also the associated technical skills and also behavioral skills. Now, one of the biggest things that the pandemic has shown is like it is not just the technical skills, it is the soft skills. Do you have the right level of empathy for your coworkers? Do you have the right communication framework? Can you actually excel at what is called an asynchronous communication, because people don't have like no meeting day. So you may have to listen to certain communication material or WebEx type of meetings or Zoom meetings in an asynchronous way and take decisions. Do you have enough systems thinking in you? Do you have design thinking in you? All these skills are progressively becoming important even at an entry level role. So while we think about technical skills, soft skills are really what truly progresses a role from a maturity level. And then there are certain functional competencies. This is a new layer that Draup has introduced because I spoke a little bit about the context. So, and that layer is very important to understand why you are using that particular skill. So the same skill can be used in two different contexts. It becomes important to truly understand that. This boilerplate model is used effectively by large tech companies, and the way they move resources from, say, an L1, L3 at a Google, all the way to senior levels. There is a systemic way of building these skills across levels and progressing them in a systemic, in a proactive way. And that is why what we have seen in big tech companies is been fascinating on all the critical roles. So some of you may be involved in strategic workforce planning here, and this type of boilerplate model is almost a must for all critical roles and critical skills in the enterprise, because in a tech company or in all companies, as companies get into more of a SaaS model, product management, commercial roles, digital marketing, technology layers, all are becoming super critical. So understanding the elasticity across the roles, how roles progress across levels, and what skills do we need to impart across these levels become increasingly important. One other interesting component that we worked on is certain roles. There could be some industry flavor as well. So the same role, the dimension, it can be an industry standard role, meaning across industries it can be a same role, or you may have to bring in some competencies from industry as well, whether it is an energy industry or a media industry. You have ability to bring in certain skills and be very proactive about building those skills. And one other component that we actually really look through, I'm going to skip a few slides in the interest of time, is really at what level, whether we are moving across roles or levels, how do we actually make sure there are enough certification layer built in across each of these touch points, and mapping that granularly and mapping that in a way where you can proactively communicate with the resources can be extremely beneficial for your career conversations. In the end, one of the important things that we cannot also miss is so far we talked about helping progressions within the job family across multiple roles within a job family, or developing maturity within a job role. A biggest thing that needs to happen is really progression across job roles. Say, for example, someone like a big data scientist, right? If you unpack what they had done, say 5-6 years ago, they might have been a statistical analyst. And if you unpack that a little bit and go even a little bit in history, you can actually see some of them, the profession that actually triggered that could be an operations research person or a logistics engineer moving multiple materials across network of transportation points. And so there is a connectivity between data analysis and then big data analytics. Now, say for example, digital marketing analysts. Many of them are basically people who excelled in content writing, and over time they picked up tools like SEO, SEM through Google type of training programs that is administered by companies like Google. And then they try out a few things. They understand customer segmentation, market segmentation, clustering, sentimental analysis, and then say that, okay, these are the types of posts and keywords are resonating well, and how do I become a digital marketing analyst? So this type of hierarchy, we have mapped about 4.5 million profiles and paths. And what that tells us is the people who are currently playing a role, there is obviously a history of how they transition, and understanding that helps us reverse engineer. So suddenly if we have a data analyst who's very good, and let's say we sense there is an attrition risk, we can actually proactively offer them to say that, hey, can we transition you over the next 12 to 15 months into a data scientist, and that or it may not be an immediate full-blown data scientist, maybe a junior entry-level data scientist, and work from there. That type of conversations can kind of completely change your perspective on how you can truly treat inventory as your true assets in the balance sheet. And that is our true view. What we believe is all companies really seriously need to look at what are the skills that they truly have currently, and what are the next level of skills that they need to acquire and develop, and what are some of the groundbreaking skills that they truly need to consider that would put them on top of the quadrant. And doing that actually will help you understand, where am I going to build these skills and how am I going to build these skills? What are the resources that are truly going to help me get there? And build a proper training plan for each one of this layer. And that could be a specific development plan such as this, where you can look at, in order to develop these advanced skills, these are the defined curriculums that I have access to, and these are the resources that I'm going to move into. Such an effective proactive strategy can, we have seen that it saves a lot of effort and time. And we sincerely hope that you gained a few pointers here. And if you need more questions or data assets to put this into practice, please stop by our booth, and we'll be delighted to explain more. Thank you for this brilliant opportunity, and really privileged to be here.